Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author and robot, and today I know it's been a while, but we're doing a book review or a book walkthrough or a book critical, however you want to talk about this. I go a little deep, but I I go a little deep for what is a book review, but it's the easiest way to describe what we're about to see. But before we get started, just a couple of things. Number one, check out Lemoy down in the description below if you would like to participate in the prompt, I read your stories on this channel. Number two, check out PitchFit if you are creative and you would like your book pitched on this channel. Number three, if you enjoy what I do here, please remember to like, share, subscribe for more. And if we hit 1,000 subscribers, I will do a shelf tour. And there are a lot of weird things on my shelf in addition to books. At least a handful of weird things. Okay, a lot might be over exaggerating, but there are some things over there of questionable nature. Uh, and Number four is if you're interested in getting an ARC copy of my new book or pre-ordering, check out the link down below for Bleed More, Body More, coming out in October. It's going to be lit. So that's all for now. Getting into the business. Size Zero is the first in a crime series called Visage by Abigail Mangin. It does have a satirical spin to it, which takes the horror and goes way over the top to make delivering the darker subject matter of the story a little bit more palatable. Some of the characters are also over the top. Now, it left me feeling kind of disappointed. So I went in pretty entertained and I was excited for the dialogue early on, but it dropped off very fast. It felt like after about the 25% mark. I loved the idea. I loved the author's style. I liked the bombastic nature of the book and the characters, some of them who weren't afraid to just say whatever came to mind. But at some point, the different plot parts felt like they came from different ideas from different drafts, and they didn't quite get woven together. And that's where the story started to fall apart for me. So get comfy. We're going to go through the summary, and it is pretty long, so I hope you've got your beverage. And then after we talk the summary, I'll get into my specific response to the book. So, the novel opens up with Ava, an 11-year-old girl, being propositioned by a modeling agent. Her mother sells her for some coke and $300, and we mean the sniffy coke, not the drinky coke. Flash forward to Fashion Week of 2019. Ava's now 24. She's locked in a closet, handcuffed and weak. Someone puts a needle in her arm to calm her down, and then she's dressed and they push her onto the stage. She walks down the runway in a coat made of human. She falls to the ground. An embedded eyeball falls out and rolls away. Now that's what I call a showstopper. Time to meet the other protagonist of the book, Cecil. He's a monk, but he's not like other monks. Oh, no. He doesn't adhere to the rules of the abbey as much as the other monks do, and how you're introduced to him is he's sitting outside of the abbey when a young boy comes running up to him. The child is around age 8 and crying that he's going to hell because he kissed another boy. His parents beat him and they want to send him to Jesus camp for that. Eventually, the mom shows up begging Cecil to help her with the devilish child. Cecil tells the mom that she needs to let her son wear sequins and join musical theater if that's what he wants to do and kiss boys, and that you're not allowed to beat him and neither is your husband. Stop that. The boy's like, "You're the best." Skip over to Cecil having dinner in the abbey and answering prayers via video call. One of the prayer call-ins is Margot Leclerc, Cecil's mother, and the owner of the agency that just walked the human coat down the runway. She wants to pay a monk to come around and say that they're all good people so that the media will just go the frick home. And she also lectures them, saying that she wants Cecil to come back because her useless son has joined a monastery for some reason. Cecil pushes an abbey cat off the counter and sees bloody paw prints being left in its wake. Cecil follows the bloody paw prints that he's now noticed are on the floor and finds a bloody package outside the abbey. They wait to open it until the police arrive. Meanwhile, Cecil goes to church service, bonding with the little boy from earlier when a camera crew bursts into the chapel. A bunch of reporters demand to talk to him. Rumor has it that Cecil killed the girl whose skin was worn on Fashion Week, and then he became a monk to hide. Meanwhile, cops have arrived at the abbey, and so they all open the bloody package together. Inside is a severed hand, an invitation, and a bracelet that belonged to Annabelle. That is the missing girl from Cecil's childhood. It was also his childhood girlfriend. It's also the woman that he is being accused of having murdered when he was also a teenager. The cops say they're going to do a DNA test on the hand and the coat to verify the identity of the girl. The cops, again, accuse Cecil of murdering Annabelle. He denies it. The abbot tells Cecil that he needs to get out of the abbey and deal with his drama before coming back to the abbey. If he wants to become a monk, it has to be on a full devotional choice and not because he's running from his problems. The next morning, he's ready to leave, and his mother comes to pick him up in a very large and loud car she calls the Rambo Lambo. Currently, Cecil's cousin Clara is under arrest for the coat. Clara works as a fashion designer under Margot. On the way into New York from New Jersey, Margot tells Cecil that the press is going to take his statement yet again to convince the public that he didn't kill Annabelle, or at least to try to convince the public. Cecil is like, why would anyone ever think that I killed my best friend? And Margot's like, it's because you're hot, charming, and untrustworthy. You know, the level of hotness you are is pretty much equal to how much people should trust you, which is exactly why Margot is the most untrustworthy person of all. She says so herself. During the rest of the drive, there's some backstory on the growth of the LeClaire modeling empire, wherein Margot embraced the rumors about the estate and Cecil in order to make money from morbid backdrops and photo ops and name recognition. There is also a brief mention that her husband might have had connections to Nazi scientists who then gave them the perfect set of twin models that helped them build their brand and notoriety. Once at the LeClaire estate, Cecil goes in looking for Ava, the model who had been wearing the human coat down the runway. Of course, the modeling agency has moved into the estate, so there are models everywhere, and you get a lot of description of sexuality and death and people being too skinny, while models also throw themselves at Cecil trying to advance their careers. He finds himself in a casting room with a bunch of models. One is named Jordan, and she keeps throwing herself on top of Cecil, trying to seduce him. She's literally riding him while in underwear because all of the models in the room are pretty much naked. Cecil even pauses his search to make garments for the girls because they're all so pretty much naked, and he's very uncomfortable, and he just has that ability because he grew up around fashion, so he can make clothing on the fly. I wish that this had actually come up later in the story because it feels like it could have been important, and it feels like a part of Cecil's character that he put away when he went to join the Abbey, but it actually, him making clothing, doesn't really come back to be any sort of importance to the story. After all of that, Jordan keeps trying to have her way with Cecil to advance her career, even as Cecil continually tells her that he can't hire her and that he won't do anything sexy with her. The only reason he's hanging around is because he's looking for Ava. As Cecil talks to the models, he's surprised by all of the things that they want, finding out that the models don't live in luxury, but that they're all kind of it's a sad existence that they're all living, and they just want stuff like chocolate and somebody to say I love you, really. Flashback then to Ava as an 11-year-old, her models taking sexual pictures of her, undressing her, measuring her, while emotionally manipulating her into compliance. When Ava gets sad about the loss of her pet hamster, the agent tells her, you should be happy that that's the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Fast forward a few years, and Ava's sitting in jail with no one to come and visit her because nobody cares. In comes Perdana, who is Cecil's godmother and Margot's business partner. Perdana offers Ava a modeling job in a future. Ava refuses, saying that she will never be a slave like that again. Perdana pushes, saying that she needs a fighting spirit, a spy to infiltrate the industry with her, and Ava has just the personality. Still, Ava refuses. Perdana gives Ava an Edgar Allan Poe book carved out and filled with the dead butterflies. This has meaning to Ava, and she agrees to work with Perdana. Throughout this book, you'll see dead butterflies or butterfly imagery used constantly, but I don't think it ever really became important. At least I never got anything out of the butterfly symbolism. Back to the present, Cecil's walking with his mother to some room where models seem to be doing a promo shoot of some kind. His mother's really into sex, to the point where her cane collection, and yes, she does walk with a cane, just I feel like for the fashion of it, her cane collection is just made up of different types of bone and ivory carved to look like women doing sexy things or being sexy, like all of them, and a shaft. She's got a couple of canes that look like shafts and balls. Margot tells Cecil that he should never talk directly to the press and he should only give statements through pre-tapes because then you can prim and prep your presentation so you look exactly the way you want to look. Cecil's supposed to do a pre-tape for the press for his Annabelle story after Margot does hers, but as Margot throws Clara under the bus for her being like sickening, and this is all just everything is happening because Margot is one sick puppy. Cecil's just like, I am not going to be a part of this. Goodbye. So then he walks out. Before leaving the room, however, he invites all of the present models to be his guests at dinner tonight so they don't have to eat in the basement, since that's apparently regular practice. Cecil then returns to his guest room. Jordan, the model from earlier, retrieves him for dinner. Cecil goes down to dinner and observes the differences between the models. Some of them eat full meals, some of them just stuff themselves with orange juice dipped cotton balls because they are not allowed to gain weight. It's in their contracts. Cecil tells the girls to eat or he won't, but they all beg him to eat because they like watching people eat. It's practically like porn to them. They feel like they're eating when they're watching other people eat, so he complies. Cecil notices somebody standing in the hallway, and that's when he asks Jordan if all of the models are at the table, and Jordan's like, psh, only the models that actually matter, because there are more there, just not there. The girls then start gossiping about the industry and Annabelle and talking about how Margot obviously shot Annabelle and got rid of the body. This leads to Jordan saying that she used to live with Annabelle, and it seemed like Annabelle was in the industry because she had some professional lingerie shots with VD on them, and VD is kind of a big deal, even though nobody really knows who VD is. Margot walks into the room and scatters the girls off, collecting Cecil to come with her. Cecil questions Margot about Annabelle, but she won't say anything. The two of them go to the 4th floor of the mansion. The floor was described to Cecil as a place where the models who will never make it live. It's actually basically a dormitory for underage girls. The girls are very sexual, wearing nearly nothing, taking off their clothes without pause, including running up to Margot as soon as she enters the room and pulling up their shirts to show her how cold it is based on how pointy their nipples are. Like, that's what we're talking about here. There's also a room made of glass boxes for the girls to practice posing in, setting up themselves to look like sexual dolls. Margot and Cecil walk through this area to get to the keys to Margot's work office. It doesn't really make sense as to why her keys would just randomly be on this floor, so this scene only read to me like it was a reason to show off the underage girls being sexualized. And I wouldn't care if it made more sense for the action in the story, but it doesn't. So it comes off as kind of preachy prose in a scene only set up to say, hey, look at this thing. I need to make sure that you get what I'm trying to do here. This is really where the author's theme and purpose of the book really feels like it's starting to push and take over the story, rather than the story being about the characters. Cecil shares that he's disgusted by the condition of the girls. His mother tells him to butt out because he's never been involved in the family business and he's never really cared, so he can GTFO. After retrieving the key from Margot's office, the two go up there and Cecil addresses Margot about Annabelle's disappearance. Turns out that Margot knew about the disappearance. It happened at the mansion just after she'd visited, and sorry for lying to you all of this time. Oopsies. Cecil then asks his mother who VD is. Margot says she doesn't know anyone named VD and Jordan is making stuff up. Margot then hands Cecil an old picture of Annabelle when she was a teenager. This triggers a flashback to some time ago in the Hamptons when Cecil and Annabelle were teenagers hanging out. The two of them have a romantic moment together rolling around in the ocean before they're interrupted by Clara. And then Margot walked over to say, hey, the entertainment isn't coming and we need a new singer for the national anthem. Clara volunteers and is rejected, and then Annabelle is accepted as the singer. Following the song, Annabelle falls off the stage, and then Clara is found in the kitchen with cut wrists. That's the end of the flashback. Cecil's now sitting in his guest room in the LeClaire mansion, Googling to find VD models. Jordan randomly comes in and starts flirting with Cecil. Again, he rejects her advances. Cecil asks Jordan what she wants, and she says that she's scared of Margot because she thinks that she made Margot mad by sharing stuff about Annabelle and the VD thing. Jordan takes off her hoodie and tries to use more sexuality to get Cecil to let her stay, but it doesn't work. She slaps him across the face for rejecting her and then leaves. Cecil falls asleep with the hoodie pressed against his face, smelling it. In the morning, he finds a piece of paper in the hoodie pocket which says Annabelle worked for the House of VD in 2016 and had been in Shanghai for a couple of years but was coming back to the United States. And don't worry about the details. The cops aren't going to bother them. Cecil rushes out of the room to go and find Jordan, but of course he can't find her. He tries calling 911, but they aren't answering the phone because 911 doesn't take phone calls anymore. Then he returns to his room. Cecil finds a device called a dial. It's basically a smartwatch with a specialized network connection and a projection screen on it. He uses this to call 911, and that works. Cecil tells the detectives about the letter that he found in Jordan's sweatshirt and how he can't find Jordan, suggesting that maybe she's at a fashion show his mother is getting ready for right at that second. The detective says she's going to head over to the fashion show to look for Jordan, and Cecil's like, okay, I'll meet you there. At this moment, there was one of my favorite things that I wish had been played with more in this story, and that's that Cecil caught his own reflection in a mirror. While staying at the monastery, he says that he hadn't really seen himself in years and he didn't put any real attention into his appearance. Yet, when he caught a glimpse of himself now, and as someone from an elite and superficial family, he felt his old habits and self-consciousness coming back out. The itch to clean himself up overtook him, and he put on the silk suit that was waiting for him and fixed his hair and shaved and all of that noise. He prays to God to give him strength not to fall into his old persona. This would have been such an interesting direction for the book to go, and an interesting character struggle for Cecil to have, but it never comes up again. Now, at the location of the fashion show, Cecil runs around looking for Jordan with no luck. However, he does find Ava. He asks her about VD and if she's seen Jordan. Ava pretty much laughs it off, going, yeah, if Jordan is gone, then she's gone. But good luck with your search, and then she is taken away to fill in for Jordan on the runway. As the runway show goes on, Cecil's looking around everywhere for Jordan. Yeah, no dice. So he asks Margot where Jordan is once the show is over. Margot first says that she's there, but then says that she quit, and then says that she quit because she slept with Cecil. Margot leaves without further explanation. There's apparently an oil pit in the middle of this showroom. I'm not entirely sure why or how or when it got there, but Cecil slips and falls into it. Reaching into the black liquid, he finds Jordan's corpse. An alarm on her dial goes off, and then he goes to turn it off, but instead of turning off the sound, her dial projects a recorded image of Margot pushing her body into the oil. Margot is immediately arrested. Outside the venue, Cecil is asked by police about his involvement and what he knows about his mother's new guilt. He loses his temper, telling them that no one needed to die if they'd only done their jobs. Cecil is pulled away by Perdana's bodyguard because Perdana wants the suit that he's wearing back so that she can clean it. That suit was one of her designs. Cecil's pushed into a room. It turns out Perdana's in there too. Sexual tension ensues because apparently the two of them have a thing for each other. Perdana's sort of lecturing Cecil about how he and Margot are tanking the Leclerc agency's reputation with all of this business. Perdana then shares that she's been surveilling the Leclerc business for a while and the shifty business that's going on. She hates the NYPD, so she's brought nothing to their attention. Cecil is exhausted by the bickering going on between them. In that moment, it seems a little stuffed dog that Cecil has kept on him since childhood has fallen out of his pocket. Perdana's like, oh, it's cute you still carry that around. And this launches into a chapter that is entirely exposition on Perdana, talking about her background in Italy and how that dog came from a child that she met in a train station just before a terrorist bomb went off. She went back to help after the bomb attack and found the doll under the rubble that killed the child. She then took that doll with her when she fled the country. She met Margot in New Orleans and they built the business together. In present time again, Cecil returns to the Leclerc mansion. He goes through his mother's office and finds a pre-taped press conference video of his mother that's been recorded. In it, she says that Cecil is the one that killed Annabelle and he is mentally disturbed, and that's why they put him in the monastery to hide him from doing worse things in the future. Cecil smashes the computer out of anger. A white rat runs into the room. It's Ava's pet, Figaro, and she is chasing it. Ava states that she works for Perdana and is only pretending to work for Margot. Cecil says that he cares about her and the models because they all look so sick and overly sexual. Ava's like, don't worry about me. I've been to prison. And Cecil offers to pray for her, but that leaves Ava feeling offended. Ava and Cecil talk about the last person to have seen Jordan, which was Freddie, Margot's assistant slash cameraman. They head to the elevator with the intentions of going down into the basement, but Giselle, the basement guard, is missing. But hey, just in time, Freddie appears, informing them that all models need to be in the basement right now. That is the emergency clause that Margot said because she's in jail. All models go to the basement. Ava and Cecil are like, yeah, no. And they refuse to comply. Eventually, Freddie's like, fine, we're just not going to go to the basement then if you're not going to cooperate. And so Cecil and Ava tie Freddie up, take him into the elevator, and they have to guess the code to the elevator to get down into the basement. Unfortunately, they use up all of their guesses. On the last guess, they get it correct, and so the elevator kind of just drops and it breaks, and they can't use the elevator to get back to the surface. But oh well, at least all three of them are stuck in the basement, right? For some reason, after this happens, Ava and Cecil, who have used duct tape and zip ties on Freddy, just leave him in the elevator and walk off to explore the basement, leaving him there unguarded and I don't know. I don't know why. He's obviously kind of a problem. Immediately after stepping off the elevator, there are a couple of questionable things. First, the two of them wander into an unlocked room marked Recruitment Center, where a bunch of computer monitors are set up on the wall, constantly scouting Instagram profiles and automatically sending out invitations to become models to the right profiles. Ava tells Cecil how terrible it all is because the only 1% make money modeling. Everyone else is a slave, and the industry preys on desperate young people. Then they find a home gym with models training themselves into exhaustion. There are a couple of similes to Auschwitz. A girl falls off of a treadmill, which prompts a voice to literally beckon the words of Auschwitz: "Work will make you free." Cecil tells the girls to get off the treadmills, and once given permission, they obey. They don't really want to be doing any of this anyway. Ava and Cecil keep going through the basement, and they come across a laundry room where even more models are doing laundry by hand. Cecil says that they need to call the police. Ava is like, no, police are stupid. So everything is just gonna stay how it is, I guess. That's fine. Finally, Cecil and Ava come to a mirror door that unlocks upon seeing Cecil's face. Inside are walls covered in world maps and pictures of underage girls pinned to the places from which they came. Ava goes on about how the industry preys on young, illiterate, and poor children from everywhere, pays off the families, and then cuts the kids off from talking to anyone. The modeling agencies basically own their models, and they take their passports and all of their IDs, and it's pretty much a done deal then. This all comes through exposition or Ava directly explaining things to Cecil, so he doesn't have to discover anything on his own or ask questions. It's all just sort of there. Eventually, they also pick up a VD binder and stick it in her backpack and a suitcase of, I think this was passports and pictures. They also find a copy of the LeClaire agency bylaws, which say that Cecil, being the vice president, is now in charge of everything because Margot's incapacitated in jail. Ava tells him to take the reins of the agency and save the girls, or else he's going to go to jail too because he looks complacent since he's related. A whimpering sound comes from a closed closet door. Cecil follows it into a room that's filled with basically hanging body bags. He reaches to one that's moving and finds Giselle inside. She says that Freddy locked her in there so that he could steal everyone's passports, as if the agency wouldn't already be in charge of all of that stuff. Okay, so we gotta take a break here. It's at this point that I was very confused and disappointed. We're at about 40% of the way through the book, and this is a major thing because the story is starting to break apart at this point, and it kind of just goes from here. So Cecil asks Giselle where Freddy is, and Giselle says that he's at his house having a party. Now, I had thought that Cecil and Ava caught Freddy in the elevator and tied him up. I even went back to those pages to make sure that I wasn't mistaken, and yeah, they had tied Freddy up with a zip tie and then crashed the elevator so he couldn't just, go back upstairs without them knowing. He was obviously there working by collecting the girls to get them into the basement. So how and why is he having a party at the same exact time, and how did he get there to have the party? This never gets clarification, and to me it felt like the author had different plot ideas between different drafts and never removed one of them to make it cohesive. Anyway, now that Cecil and Ava know about the party, they're going to go find Freddy at his house. So they take some hidden staircases up to the ground floor to find the NYPD outside of the house with a search warrant. Cecil tells them about the slave den underground, and there are a bunch of girls that they need to see, and there are a bunch of girls that they can help, but the NYPD is like, nah, we're only checking the house bits. We don't have any, our warrant doesn't cover any of the business side of the house. So immediately after saying we can't check any of the business side of the house, the NYPD goes into Margot's office and starts confiscating stuff from her office. It would have made sense if they went into her, bedroom and specifically went around places where obvious wrongdoing was left behind and just didn't take any of that important stuff. In fact, that actually would have been funny and accurate to how the police are supposed to be either sleazy, stupid, or paid off, but this actually didn't happen, and it left me feeling confused with the choices in the scene. Cecil and Ava follow the cops around to see what they're going to find, and then Ava randomly lifts an ottoman cushion to show Cecil meth and Adderall, which she says is given to the models to sedate them. The cops check the upper 4 floors of the house, but the narrative voice only seems outraged that the cops wouldn't check the basement because of all of the girls in the basement. Somehow, the cops totally overlook, or it's never mentioned, how the 4th floor is a den of sexualized minors. And we don't even get any, like, the children from the 4th floor were moved down to the basement. I know that Freddy was moving them, but it was hard to have continuity when we were not being shown what the building looked like anymore. This actually would have been a good spot for Cecil to actually learn what was on the 4th floor, because I can't see Margot actually showing Cecil all of that stuff when he's not involved in the family business, if you know what I mean. Once the cops leave, Cecil sends all of the models to live at the monastery for now because the monks will help them. Then Cecil and Ava finally head over to Freddy's house party. Cecil has been expecting some grand, loud, bumping oons, 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 oons thing going on, but it's quiet and cult-like inside, with weird art exhibits of Coke cans, pumpkin spice lattes, KKK uniforms, and zombies with barcodes staring at TV with dinners in their laps besides mannequins covered in bloody knives and cotton balls. The doorman leads Cecil and Ava into another room where they are asked to draw squares for the square wall. Cecil asks to talk to Freddy. The doorman brings back Freddy's parents. Cecil is told that Freddy's grounded and not allowed to talk to anyone. Freddy's like 34, just for the record, but this is, I think, supposed to be a comment on, like, man-children. Cecil disturbs the parents by wiping his face with a napkin that's part of an art exhibit, and he didn't know that. This gets Cecil pulled into an art contest that Freddy's parents run, wherein they look for the next up-and-coming artist to sponsor. Cecil and Ava are led to a room where a couple of women are laid out on a table in white cloth. Cecil's informed the contest requires that he paint one of the women and be compared to the other two, who will also paint a different woman. Also, he's going to have to paint the woman in the dark. Cecil is led to a room where he's left alone with the woman. Nervous and whatnot, sexual tension rises, and eventually he paints the woman's naked body and also fingers her with some of her guidance until she climaxes, and the time's up for the contest. Cecil's brought back out to the main room with all of the house guests and the two other competitors. So it turns out that the two other competitors painted the white fabric. Cecil is mortified, but he wins the competition because he's just brilliant. Cecil's now wondering if the woman he painted was his godmother Perdana. He couldn't tell because she was wearing a mask, but somehow he has no idea if this woman was the lady that he grew up around. It doesn't even matter. Right after Cecil is announced the winner, we skip to him listening to Freddy fighting with his parents like a child. Cecil enters the room and tells Freddy that he's running the modeling agency now, not his mother, so Freddy is now his employee and needs to answer some questions. Freddy immediately complies, showing Cecil a video of Margot pushing Jordan's body into the oil pit with her cane. Cecil asks about VD, and Freddy says VD is some kind of anonymous person who takes care of models when they're no longer good for business. Freddy also says, "You probably know who VD is, FYI. There's a reason that Annabelle was kept around for so long, you know?" Cecil and Ava head for Perdana's house next. While they drive, they talk about how the cops suck and Cecil could never grieve because he was too busy defending himself from accusations of murder. Cecil and Ava arrive at Perdana's house, which is currently surrounded by military vehicles, and Perdana is seen in the window of her house with some army generals behind her. Switch to Margot sitting in jail. Yeah, that scene doesn't last long at all, and then we're back with Ava and Cecil as they go to some place called Salon des Ming. What happened to the army being in Perdana's house? I don't really know. It doesn't ever come up again. So, Salon des Ming. It's an Asian restaurant where prostitutes hang out, apparently. One quickly latches on to Cecil, of course, and talks to him about how she's a neurologist and a prostitute, but she prefers prostituting because dealing with people's neurological problems is, it's depressing. She likes giving up control and having an easier life. The prostitute taunts Cecil's abstinence and tries to get him to give in by touching him in all of his sexy places and calling him basically a whore for God. The prostitute says that she has info that Cecil wants, and she says that she will give him the information if he will treat her the way that he would like to treat his missing girlfriend. Cecil kisses this woman on the forehead, and then the prostitute is like crying, "Oh my gosh, you really loved that woman, didn't you?" Next up, Cecil's cousin Clara comes out of nowhere. She addresses Cecil, the room goes black, she is shot, and her body is quickly taken out of the building. Cecil and Ava get a bike and they chase the ambulance past two possible hospitals. and realize that it is going to Cecil's mother's private hospital, private doctor. At the hospital, Ava and Cecil split up. Cecil goes to see the family doctor while Ava goes down to the morgue to find Clara's body. While in the morgue, Ava pretends that she's a doctoral student there to learn, and some model agent comes in to ID Clara's body, then hits on Ava asking if she's ever considered being a model because you know what? He is a looker. He gives her his card and invites her to this thing called the mall. Also, while in the morgue, there's a lot of focus on making dead bodies beautiful and the beauty of death. Going over to Cecil's side of this equation, he goes to the doctor's office where he is yelled at for being an insensitive cishet because the doctor transitioned and is not Dr. Thibault anymore, but Dr. Imogene. Pamphlets are thrown into his face, but eventually he is given permission to go and see the doctor. Cecil enters into the ward where he sees models so unhealthily thin that they aren't even able to lift their heads off of pillows. This is where Margot keeps the really, really unhealthy, thin models that she needs to nurse back up to health because they are just a little bit too anorexic. This also hides them from publicity that can cause problems for the brand. Cecil tours the place disgusted before he finds Dr. Imogene. Dr. Imogene takes Cecil to her office where she tests him to make sure that he is legit and trustworthy. Then she says that she needs his help cleaning up the place before the cops come to ask questions because of Margot's arrest. Cecil learns that Annabelle didn't fall off of the stage back at the Hamptons, but she was pushed by Clara, and then Clara tried to kill herself after feeling rejected by Margot. Cecil looks around the office. Apparently, there are silicone breasts and basically pornographic pictures of child models laying right there on the counter. He discovers the model agency is trafficking children and in some cases doing vaginal reconstruction on the girls before selling them off. Dr. Imogene suddenly is surprised that Cecil is not in on the family secrets and is like, I can't believe you lied to me. Cecil brings a knife to Dr. Imogene's neck. Imogene taunts him for being stupid, but then she answers all of his questions without any real struggle, telling him that she doesn't agree with anything Margot does, and she's wanted to help those trafficked girls this whole time. Dr. Imogene then tells Cecil that Annabelle's not dead and shows him the proof in a cooler, which has the remains of a body used to make the coat that walked down Fashion Week, and the body is a male corpse. Now totally cooperative, Dr. Imogene tells Cecil everything that she knows about Annabelle, including that Annabelle had been trafficked and working in Shanghai for years because she was so high profile. No one would use her as a model, but people paid big bucks to bang abductees. Dr. Imogene only met Annabelle when she came back to the US after years. She was super ill, had some STDs, and wanted to escape, so Dr. Imogene helped Annabelle fake her death to get away. The goal was to bring Clara and Margot down. The doctor tells Cecil that he's got to kill VD to save the girls stuck in the regime. The doctor also says that VD is running this thing called the Mall, which is a prostitution sale ring that runs every year, October 30th, a couple of days away from now. Cecil leaves the doctor, now wandering through Manhattan, thinking of how superficial and corrupt everything is while he waits to hear back from Perdana. He's now told her everything that he knows to this point. Ava sends Cecil a text message telling him to meet her at a hotel. They sit down together and Ava tells Cecil about the guy in the morgue. Cecil tells Ava about the mall, VD, and the sex trafficking. Ava then launches into a thinly veiled version of her childhood where her mother sold her for sex at age 6, telling her that the man who came to visit was her father. The guy broke her jaw during the deed. She agrees to be a model for the situation and to go to the mall in an attempt to find Annabelle, regardless of how dangerous it is, because she's been through worse than death, so fine, whatever. If it's to end trafficking situations, she's been in one, she understands. Ava and Cecil then go to Perdana's house and confront her about the human trafficking happening in the model industry. Perdana's not surprised. In fact, she knew, and she knew about Annabelle's abduction, and they weren't on purpose, she says. Billionaires always bang children. Everyone knows that. One was even killed in prison to keep the secrets for all of the others. As Perdana talks about human trafficking and pedophilic billionaires, she's also throwing herself at Cecil, trying to seduce him. Also, while she's trying to seduce Cecil, they're also making a dress out of butterflies together, and then Cecil rubs lotion on Perdana. As the conversation progresses, she asks Cecil about sex, and if he masturbates, then touches his crotch while saying that she'll think of him when she's touching herself tonight. Oh, and then she says she thinks he's naive if he thinks that he can save Annabelle. Cecil then goes to meet one of the detectives, giving her the briefcase of passports and photos for the underage models that he found in the secret room in Margot's mansion. At the moment, for some reason, the detective is just like dipping her hand into this jar of raw honey and licking it like she's Winnie the Pooh. The detective says that she can't take the photos or the passports as evidence. Also, oh yeah, Margot's out on bail, by the way, and she's staying at the Abbey with the monks and all of her trafficking victims because that's cool. Then the detective is like, okay, so if you want to take Margot down with the rest of them, then you need to bring me Annabelle, and then we can take people down. I'm not really sure what the logic is here when Cecil has actual child pornography, and that's not good enough to take down sex traffickers. But a random girl who was trafficked, that will overpower a DA more than actual child pornography. Back at the mansion, Cecil presses Margot for information about VD, but Margot claims ignorance again. VD pays good commissions, but that's all that she knows, really. She also claims that VD is a woman because women are all more evil than men, and VD is an evil bitch. Margot tries to convince Cecil not to go to the mall because it could get him in big trouble, but then she says she thinks the mall is like big Woodstock of fashion industry. This has to be Margot lying about what she knows, but the conversation in this scene seems so forced, and the dialogue/direction could have been more developed to show Margot's knowing ignorance. The scene closes with Margot telling Perdana to keep Cecil safe. Perdana takes Cecil to the mansion attic and shows him a bunch of DVDs for the modeling agency Ava was invited to at the morgue. Basically, it's a collection of recordings of model agents training young girls and telling them how to be prostitutes, smacking them around, and other human trafficking things. How there's clear video of big boss man Andre Blankus just doing all of this stuff and Perdana not using it to blackmail and pull strings, I don't really know. People have actually been murdered for this kind of stuff, but here it is just in this thing, nobody using it for anything, and the people who were involved not trying to kill other people who have evidence of their law breaking. Answer me that one. Anyway, Perdana has Cecil watch some of these videos to learn how he needs to act if he's going to be around these people because he's going to infiltrate them. She basically says, okay, look, you have to become the master, treat your models as slaves, they're merchandise, and if these guys smell anything is off about you, danger, 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 it's over. So you have to play the part. Now, this part of the novel hits hard on the after-school special vibes as the camera turns to a girl with pink hair and Blankus, the leader of this specific human trafficking group, explaining that they target girls with problems and neglectful parents. Then pan to the crying pink-haired girl. When she's addressed, she says that her dad does drugs, so she does them too, and don't judge because she's young and she's allowed to make mistakes. Blankus comforts her by going, "Oh, you're so pretty. Have you ever thought about becoming a model?" And, it's really after school, especially. The girl is supposed to be 16, but she comes off like she's 6. She's like, I can be a model. I can't wait to tell everybody and all of my friends. And the guy is like, literally, he's like, chillin'. You can't tell anyone about this. You understand? Winky face. 16-year-olds kind of responded differently to authority figures and adults, especially rebellious girls, that this was kind of set up to make her seem like. The also don't tell your parents thing is like super younger. Maybe your experiences are different, but that was my experience with that kind of stuff, and it just infantilized this character. And this book had a tendency to infantilize all of the models that it brought in that were not Annabelle or Ava. So Perdana is still flirting with Cecil at this point through all of this, and even by the end of the scene, she's practically sitting on him and kissing him, and then she's like, you get out there and you pretend to be Blankus, alright? Now that you're educated, you know what to do. Cecil then goes to Perdana's home where he meets Ava in the basement. Ava shows him a bunch of spiders Perdana's keeping that weave silk 5 times stronger than steel. She sells this stuff to the government. After that, yeah, that never comes up again, by the way. After that, Ava says she's backing out of the whole mall ordeal. Her excuse is that she works for Perdana, and Perdana doesn't want her to go. However, she agrees to do the do if Cecil will buy her an expensive crystal castle for her pet rat to live in. The Crystal House is set up on an internet auction. A bidding war ensues with some old man, wherein every time Cecil is outbid, Ava loses her temper and threatens to hurt Cecil even though he's already agreed to win the castle because he needs her for this infiltration plot. I know that Ava is kind of nutty, but she's also only getting the Crystal Castle because Cecil is literally bribing her, so she didn't need to threaten him to keep bidding. Dangling the prize with her going, "You want to find Annie, don't ya?" should have been enough, and it wouldn't have actually broken her character. Obviously, in the end, Cecil wins the castle for just over $500,000 because he's loaded and there's no stopping the plot. Choo-choo. So Ava is back on for infiltrating the mall. She's not happy about being put in danger of sex trafficking again, but she is okay with trying to save Annabelle, I guess. Then there's this particularly weird line here that goes, quote, "A big smile beamed across Ava's face. She looked like a different person. She became 6 years old in the most delightful way." End quote. The line is only especially weird because of all of the human trafficking and sexualization of children up to this point in the book, and Cecil / the narration wording it like that. It's not good contextually. Let me know if that's just me in the comments. Moving on from that, though, Ava gives Cecil a fake name, fake identification, and fake company to pretend that he's from, since everyone knows who Cecil Leclerc is, and if he walks in being himself, shit's gonna go down in a bad way. Now, it's not actually time to go to the mall yet. They have to go to some underground party first. Why? I'm not entirely sure because Ava has already been invited to recruitment. So I'm not sure how this actually ties into the story in a way that it's needed. But the party's at a construction site, despite how Perdana prepped Cecil to be the master selling the merchandise and how Ava said that he needed to blend in. Ava still takes the lead and calls Cecil her +1 once they arrive. They still get into the party because their personas don't matter. Cecil's low confidence and not good at blending in, but he says a couple of correct lines like "fuck Trump" and nobody questions him beyond that. Until a couple of women older than him recognize him, even with his mask on, because, you know, this is a masquerade party, so everyone's wearing a mask, but it doesn't stop people from recognizing anyone, apparently. The women immediately squeal about him being Cecil Leclerc. He asks them to keep it down and tells them exactly what he is doing there, why he is there. He's looking for Annabelle, and there's human trafficking going on, like, cover? What's that? Alibi? Gone. Trying to infiltrate a human trafficking site and telling people that they are there what you're doing? Why? How? How does this help anything that you're trying to do? Apparently, none of it matters. Standing with a group of women, he listens to them talk about jealousy of the young, skinnier girls complaining about how ugly models are until eventually Cecil just snaps. He tells them that they all have eating disorders and that the internet and gossip addiction have ruined everyone in the United States of America. Suck it. You're all hurting inside, he says, and you need to talk to someone. You are better than this. You deserve better than this. Get better, America. The agent from the morgue, we're going to call him Bougie, approaches and asks Ava if she can behave herself enough to be a model. The older women standing around all break down and share how depressing their lives are and that, yes, they are covering up for all of the hurting and misery that they feel by just shitting on everybody all the time. And then one of them pulls Cecil aside to tell him that the scarecrow decorations around this place, aren't decorations. Those are corpses, and you need to be careful or you're going to become one of them. She also says that she knows who VD is, and she is human trafficker Blankis's wife. Blankis's wife also says that they are killing Annabelle tomorrow since she is no longer useful. The agent from the morgue gives Cecil a card telling him when and where to take Ava to be included in the mall. Returning to Perdana's house, it's surrounded by reporters mobbing everything again for answers about Annabelle and Cecil's mother. Cecil then yells at them that he's bringing Annabelle's killer to light tomorrow. It is the day. Again, why would you say this when you are literally trying to infiltrate this human trafficking ring, and now they should be on high alert because you just said that you are going to be there on television? But this really it doesn't stop him in the future. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't matter. Nobody's on high alert, and nobody just says, aren't you Cecil Leclerc? Yeah, get the fuck out of here. He even uses his real name at the events tomorrow, and it doesn't stop anything. So, you know, Once inside of the house, Perdana says that she's going on urgent business to Shanghai. There is a scene at the dinner table where she feeds Cecil live seafood, and he is getting horny while this happens, and he feels like the smushing of the live shrimp in his teeth. Perdana eats a live octopus and then feeds one to him and talks about the way the tentacles are smacking around in her mouth while it goes down her throat. And then she leaves. Goodbye, Cecil. Good luck. Now, despite the fact that the crystal castle that Cecil literally bribed Ava with, she walks up to him and goes, you know, I'm still with you on this. I'm still going to infiltrate. And Cecil's like, really? And instead of being like, well, you kind of paid me to do that, she's like, yeah, I don't die. There's no danger. So the dangerous side of this, it doesn't really matter to me. The two are hooked up with some covert camera gear that looks like jewelry, and then they head out to the party. Of course, during the intro to the Traffickers Club, everyone is described as sleazy, as if we didn't already know that they would be, including the doorman telling Ava to pretend that she's younger than she is, because that's how the billionaires like them. And this is only made more bizarre because Ava is a very famous model. They've made that clear throughout the plot that Ava is very famous. And she did wear a coat down Fashion Week. She's been in the fashion industry since she was at least 11. But she's still told to pretend that she's like 8 years younger than she actually is. And we're supposed to believe that everyone's not going to know better and then just buy it. The doorman also decides that he particularly likes Ava for some reason and tells her not to drink the water because, shit happens when you do that. Ava's separated from Cecil and taken to a room of models ages 13 to 19 while Cecil goes to a nearby cafe for children. I don't know why it's a child cafe, but it is actually described as a cafe for children, and he's creeping out mothers and children who are there. All of the time, all of the models that are with Ava are putting on bathing suits, except for one who starts crying because she doesn't have a bathing suit. Ava probes the girl to see why she's there, and she says, well, my parents are at work. So Ava tries to get the girl out of the room so that she doesn't get trafficked, but the manager, Bougie, comes in and takes everybody to casting before Ava can rescue this chick. All of the models are lined up in front of potential managers, touched and told how to suck cock. Told to behave themselves, given the basic rules for what's about to happen to them and what the expected behavior is. Ava is sassy and doesn't play by the rules because she is too cool for that. She gets snotty with the leadership, but she is not actually kicked out. Instead, she's just sent to the Masterpiece group. This is one of those Mary Sue trope moments where it's like, oh, you're not afraid of me? Like you should be? I've killed millions of people and you're not afraid of me? Well, I like that. That actually makes you extra hot, and I like you. Yeah. No unintended consequences here, folks. Ava's group is then taken to a trashy room that looks like a dirty amusement park bathroom for some reason. Of course, the agent taunts Ava specifically going, your cover is blown, Cecil. I know that you're listening, watching, and you're powerless. Ava is mine now. While pretending that Cecil was ever actually hiding his identity at all, past the initial, here is your fake ID idea. I mean, yeah, no. Cecil races back to the location to try and save Ava, and it turns out that the doorman had no idea that what was happening inside of this building full of unsupervised teenage girls with no parents that were just rushed out in bathing suits like 20 minutes ago. I mean, bro, how was I supposed to know that something bad was going on here? Really? Really? Cecil then runs to a nearby Visage building. That is the name of Perdana's fashion company. He tries to catch her on the phone, but she's not answering. He asks someone there to help him try to contact her. While waiting for assistance, some random guy approaches Cecil and asks for his autograph for his daughter because, big fans, you know? Fans of what? I am not entirely sure. Cecil has been in a monastery for like 4 to 6 years, so what's there to be a fan of? He doesn't have a reputation beyond being a possible killer. But that's not even why they're fans. They specifically say, we don't think that you're a killer. It actually kind of would have been funny if they had been like, we want your autograph because we think you're a killer. Eventually, the people at Visage refuse to help Cecil, so he runs through past them into some locked doors. The The locked doors pretty much just open for him, and then he runs into another locked door, but he needs a code. He turns around to the assistant that chased him and asks for the code. The assistant just gives him the door code. So there's literally no resistance whatsoever, and we're solving all of these problems in a paragraph. Cecil gets into Perdana's office and tries her personal pager. That doesn't work. Then the assistant overrides Perdana's communication block, which allows the call to go through. Why didn't they do this in the beginning? I don't know. Again, no extra loops were needed. He just did it, solved it, no problem whatsoever. After finally reaching Perdana, Cecil tells her that Ava has been kidnapped. Perdana's like,
Bitch, wasn't that your plan from the beginning? Now you've got to find 2 girls tonight. Good luck.
Click. Cecil tries calling the Abbey next, and there's a bad signal. They can't help. They hang up on him too. Cecil runs out of Visage in a frenzy. A bunch of reporters are bothering him. He yells at them. A homeless man gets his attention by saying Cecil could use some Jesus. The homeless man basically points Cecil in the direction that he needs to go. He is literally pointing at a thing across the street that says the mall, and it is literally where he needs to go. So he's on his way. Going back to Ava, she is with other girls talking about selling themselves to build beautiful, bountiful careers, and it is totally worth it. Everyone gets pretty while they're being told the rules of purchase again, including the most important rule of all: do not, under any circumstances, let your John murder you. That's an extra cost, and not being included in the auctions right now. While the girls are getting ready for the main event, Annabelle comes in and tries to soothe the nerves of one of the younger girls, telling her to think happy memories while bad things are happening to her. That's how you learn to cope. The girl is supposedly 13, but again, she reads younger. Ava's watching how Annabelle interacts with the people, and as Annabelle leaves the dressing room, Ava avoids the guards, chases after her, and calls her out on being VD. From there, Annabelle just goes,
Okay, yeah, you got me.
Because everybody in this book is pretty much honest when it's convenient for the plot. All the while, Cecil has been walking around outside of the mall, looking at humans posed doing sexual and deadly things in the window, a union of sexuality and macabre on humans, while regular people, I think, walk around outside and ogle them. Obviously, Cece is disgusted. He then sees the mall door open and a couple of people come out, but it's locked. He confronts a guy that has come out and asks what time it is. The dude says he doesn't know. His watch has been stuck at 11:04, which is a design choice made by Perdana for the dials in her collection. That is also the code to get into the mall, so Cecil has now gained access. Now, he's running around the mall, a place filled with, peds. It's crawling with peds. The store clerk asks him what he's looking for in a girl, and he is not covert at all or pretending that he belongs. Somehow he doesn't get kicked out of this place by looking like a total psychotic narc, and everybody knowing that he is the runaway monk son of the LeClaire estate. Everyone knows who he is. Everyone knows he's a liability. They still let him be there. Quite honestly, they really should have just taken pictures of him in this place and blackmailed him with them, because they could. But they don't. Maybe that'll come out in a later book. Now, Cecil is shown around all of these girls and some guys in sexual situations being sold off. His new decision is to buy as many of them as he can to set them free, but he learns that he can only buy 3 total for the night. He purchases a young girl, and when asked if he wants to try her on in a changing room, they go back there, discuss her escape, and he hears some nasty conversations through the walls. So yeah, he purchases her, takes her out, hails a cab, and sets her free. While he is outside of the mall still, after hailing the cab, he pulls up his dial because he had recorded everything while he was inside of the mall. He posts this onto the internet. The first batch of comments that he gets from the internet accuse him of being a misogynist and mistreating women in the industry and shaming women with inappropriate sizes. He gives further context, saying that human trafficking is happening right now in New York in the industry, and then the comments turn to calling him a conspiracy theorist who probably thought that Hillary Clinton was a bad person, right? Ugh. He falls onto his knees, yelling at everyone.
None of you people actually care. You all just want likes on the internet.
And he's allowed back into the Ped Mall. After such a display, they still let him back into the Ped Mall, no questions asked. This time he sees Ava is up for sale, splayed out on a piano, I think it was, nearly nude. He starts some bidding war with some random guy who just keeps sticking his fingers all over Ava. and her clothing, and Ava. Despite participating in a human trafficking silent auction, both Cecil and this guy are using their real names to place bids on a person. Smart move, fellas. Real smart. Eventually, Ava spits in the guy's face and when he's too close, and he's like, oh my gosh, ew, okay, fine, you can have her. I would have expected a guy like that to be a little more, sure of winning her from something like that, you know, so that he could punish her. But okay, the dude was just sticking his fingers in the panties of a bound, kidnapped woman while saying, get wet for me. But if that's all that it takes to persuade you to not purchase a human sex slave, cool, I guess. Now Cecil's winning the bid. Then he sees Annabelle is on display for sale. The Annabelle Lay. So Cecil goes to bid on her next to see if he can win her. Suddenly, the rules of everything have changed to allow Annabelle to go into a changing room to be tried on while the bidding war is still active. I don't know how you're supposed to bid on something when the merch is no longer on display. Apparently you're not, because Cecil wins that auction. While in the changing room, Annabelle tries to get hot with Cecil while Cecil is trying to get to the bottom of what has happened to Annabelle. He asks about VD and she says she doesn't know. It's announced that he's won both of his auctions. He goes to pay for them, but he can't afford them. He's hit his credit limit between the Crystal House and the little girl that he already purchased. Ava convinces him to only buy her because she'll make sure that Ava doesn't get put into danger. Cecil agrees and purchases Annabelle. Meanwhile, the fallback, since Cecil can't buy Ava, is the guy who Ava spat on. And now he's super excited, even though before he was like, fuck that bitch. Literally no consistency here. Annabelle and Cecil then leave together. She brings him to the Beacon Royal Hotel, telling him that Ava and that guy will be here because it's a giant party that everyone from the mall always comes to. It's kind of a big deal. It's basically set up like a naturalist setting with an orgy going on all over the place, everywhere, all the time. There is a girl screaming, no, stop, please, don't bash my head in, I don't want this. Annabelle is dismissive of all of the sex and rape and violence. She then excuses herself. The violence continues on this one chick that escalates until she is bleeding and passed out in a pool. Some hired help comes out of nowhere and takes the passed out girl to the medical bay, and Cecil follows to help administer care. After the nurse walks away, he leans down to kiss the lips on the mask that the girl is wearing. It turns out that that girl is Perdana. From the bed in the medical bay, it's got little dividers. They hear some woman abusing some little girl, telling her to take off her clothes. Cecil asks Perdana if VD is dangerous, and Perdana is like,
only to you, dude.
It also comes out that Perdana has known VD this whole time, obviously. Cecil leaves the medical bay and runs into Annabelle, who says she saw Ava being taken upstairs. Flip perspective to Ava, who is with her bidder, James Caldwell. Somehow he thought that it was a good idea to let this girl handcuff him to a bed and give her all of the power after she spat at him and he molested her in public. Seems like a totally reasonable decision that couldn't backfire at all, right? Yeah, because now she's whipping him and riding him like a horse and humiliating him and won't let him go, and he's begging, please let me go, please. Of course she's not listening. What is this decision? I mean, this is so nonsensical. How did they even get into this situation? It's an escape from true consequences and tension, because you cannot actually put Ava in true danger and make her actually suffer unintended consequences or unplanned consequences. That's what is all happening right now. So we're suddenly in the hallway now of VD's house with no scene change signifiers. It's literally just like one paragraph ends with being with Ava, and then where the next paragraph starts with our guy Cecil, and there's no spacing, there's no nothing. We're just in a different place now. Annabelle shows him where everyone sleeps and tells him that the girls live here. They're walking past a bunch of girls and sex when Cecil is like, oh my gosh, I think I figured it out. You're VD. And she's like, no, I'm not VD. How did Cecil even come to this conclusion? I guess it must have solely been based on how callous Annabelle is regarding all of this stuff. You would think that you would have recognized her voice in the med bay when she was threatening that little girl behind a curtain, but he didn't. Annabelle then drags Cecil into her office and explains all of her choices and why she's become the megadon of human trafficking. She faked her death to frame Margot and Perdana because fuck those bitches. They ruined her life. She dismissed Cecil's outrage, going, please, you forgot about me and moved on. Plus, everything you have in your life is from selling girls, so don't pretend that you are better than me. It comes out that Annabelle has apparently always been insane. Even in childhood, she would beat up on Cecil, and she lit his toys on fire, and she attacked Clara with a knife at the Hamptons, and somehow Cecil never noticed any of this. Annabelle's pretty much just like,
Fuck the world. I'ma sell girls. It's my turn to be on top because I suffered and you can either get in line or die, bitch.
She calls in some guards who refuse to shoot Cecil because their orders are from higher up, and Annabelle is like,
Bruh, I am higher up.
the guards leave, but they also leave a knife behind. Cecil tells Annabelle that Ava's better than her. Annabelle is like, lol, you think so? And then she turns on some camera that shows Ava in a situation where a little girl from the changing room is being threatened, and so is Ava's rat. The guard is like, pick one of these things to die, and Ava's like, no, not my rat, he means everything to me. The rat dies, and then Margot comes out of nowhere and kills the guard, and the day is saved. Camera shuts off. Annabelle is like, okay, fine. I just like manipulating, buying, and selling people. Her character is so all over the place. Her motivations feel fake, and because of it, it's just like one thing layered on top of another with no connection to actually motivate. It's all just making her bad for no reason. She tries to convince Cecil to join her again. He says no, and then he kills her with the knife. Cecil goes outside of the VD house and tells the police exactly what happened, that he killed that girl, and they're like, sounds like self-defense to me. And that's where that ends. Margot then goes up and says,
OMG, I didn't know that the mall was human trafficking. I just thought that it was sketchy, which is why I never participated. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
this lying hoe, I swear. Earlier she was like, I've always tried to get an invitation to the mall. She is just, I want to say that she is trying to just lie her way out of everything. But this book is so inconsistent, I can't tell when people are actually lying or when the story is inconsistent. And that is kind of one of the problems with inconsistencies. More importantly, we have zero character follow-through with anyone here. Margot is cool with letting people die and literally killing them in a hospital, but is like, oh, human trafficking is too far. Meanwhile, she was human trafficking in her own building. What do you want me to believe, Marge? Because I don't believe anything about you. And I can't even say it's because you're a liar. I just can't see any consistent line of where you're telling the truth and where you're lying, and what parts are just the plot falling through from the craft side of this story. I want to say Margot is trying to protect herself from all of the bad business, because even her BFFL business partner is like,
Yeah. Human trafficking. Yeah.
but Margot is just like,
Not me. My hands are clean, babe. My hands are clean.
in the end, the NYPD and Cecil decide, yeah, no cops or feds should be involved in taking down this international pedophilic human trafficking ring. The models are all just going to go and live at Margot's place, and that's the end of that. Margot forces the business on Cecil, even though he says he doesn't want to work in it, and she's like, too bad, I'm retiring, and I'm going to go live at the monastery and help those guys do things. Cecil finds out Perdana's behind all of the human trafficking and owns the BD building, and that's why the guards didn't kill him. After Perdana tells him this, Cecil then runs to his mother and tells her what he just found out. He asks her if he should kill Perdana. His mother is like,
You're not gonna kill her. You've always wanted to fuck her.
and Cecil is like,
Dude, bro, she's like twice my age, and I'm a monk.
and Margot is like,
She's not that much older than you, though.
but dude, who is going to listen to a bunch of peds? Like, these same people said that about a 6-year-old, okay? The whole dynamic in this situation is just weird, and it doesn't feel like it works with who Cecil is supposed to be now. He is just kind of a horn dog. And after listening to an author interview where the author of this book talks about how she didn't go into this thinking that he would be a monk, but a horny, irresponsible man-child, parts of this book still feel like that old persona is still in here, and it never worked itself out to make Cecil a consistent character with a consistent character arc. After Cecil is done talking to his mom, he goes to talk to Perdana again, and she is flirting with him again, telling him that she is fine with trafficking people, it's just kind of the way of the world, and she would rather be rich than not, so who cares? She also admits to being the chick Cecil fingered at the body painting thing earlier, and Cecil is like, what if I have to kill you? And she goes,
Good luck, babe.
Finn. And that's it, and I'm hurting. So thank you for, if you are still here, thank you for sticking through that comprehensive plot summary. Let's get into the response I had to this book. First, the good. After the initial Cecil chapter, where he was proving that he is not like other monks, I actually liked him. I liked the dynamics of going the complete opposite of how he grew up, the complete rejection of the life he was supposed to have, and I am a sucker for contrast. By having him not just run away from fashion and sex, but go full celibate, it gave a great contrast to the world he grew up in and the person and lifestyle he had to fight against. Like I said during the summary, I would have loved to see that clash of Cecil's previous life with the current choices more. The monk who hadn't looked at himself in 6 years, and the guy from the fashion industry family who sees himself in the mirror and needs to look a certain way. That would have been such a delicious character arc and such a delicious character fight. This book was also peak exaggeration and characterization, and I'm all for it. I love descriptions that go over the top to be meaningful. Sometimes, though, I think this did go a little too far to the point that it pounded what it was trying to say into your head. After the initial descriptions, many of them were the same, constant, and long, and I think that if they were cut back in some places, they would have been more effective. But this author is great with a cheeky voice for satire and exaggeration. I also really liked the chemistry and relationship between Margot and Cecil, specifically in the beginning. After that, it kind of fell apart. But the adversarial nature of it and the contrast were perfect when they were first being reunited in the beginning, the clashing of the two worlds. Early on dialogue was also poppy and fun. I was actually sharing a lot of the earlier dialogue, or some of the earlier dialogue, with some of my other reader and writer friends because I was having a good time, and I was kind of disappointed that this were dropped off on recommendation territory. That disappeared after the purpose of the book kind of got supercharged, injected, because the primary goal then became look at how terrible modeling and sex trafficking is, instead of telling us the story about these characters and showing us the misery through their eyes and experiences. Okay, so let's get into the rest of it. The narration. The third-person narration had opinions that were constantly inserted, which broke immersion in the story. It didn't take very long. I even think that it was in the first chapter when I first heard the author's voice telling me how she felt about the modeling industry and giving opinions on models or how models were treated. Then, if you watch the interview that she did on Instagram, some of the things that she says in narration are almost word for word repeated in the book, which makes it more clear that it was her voice as the narrator in spots of the book, not any of the characters. The POV of the narration could have been stronger if it stuck to the characters and didn't try to tell you what it thought was right or wrong or what opinions to have based on what was being shown. The novel read to me like it was avoiding being vague or just letting you make up your own opinions because it wanted to make sure that you understood the stance, the problem, the disgust, and left no room for interpretation or judgment or anything else. You had to know that condemned, which I've seen this go around a lot in critical and writing circles. That is, if you present a bad opinion or point of view in a book, you have to combat it somehow and say that it's bad, or else you're obviously supporting it, and I don't think that that's true. You can show the damage of evil or something bad by just showing it in its entirety and telling the story of how it's damaging these characters. You don't have to specifically wag your finger at people when you put a bad thing in a book, just to say that this is bad, okay? That kind of comes off like talking down to the readers. The pacing in this book is super fast. It mostly starts things at moments where things are happening in the story and keeps things jumping. Sometimes it's a little too fast and it seems like it's actually skipped a beat or a scene, like a videotape skipping forward. Some of the reading was also a bit jumpy and seemed like it was an earlier draft where everything wasn't quite worked out yet and hadn't been fully placed. While mostly fast-paced, the flashbacks did slow it down a lot, and it didn't seem necessary to tell this part of the story. Since this is the first book in a series of 4 or 5 books, I don't think that all of the backstory was necessary for the characters here, especially Perdana's backstory chapter, which felt completely random and totally unnecessary. The shift to the underground art contest felt very random with no reason to really take us there, but at the same time, it ties into the whole Freddy situation, and with him escaping from the elevator, I just had a whole problem with that whole area because something didn't make sense there. The last thing with the pacing is that there were several chapters throughout where chapters set up a scene and then it kind of just abruptly ended and then we skipped to somewhere else, and it felt like we were missing a whole scene. Descriptions. When it came to the descriptions, I enjoyed a lot of the physical descriptions quite a bit. They even got visceral, which is pretty much my favorite kind of description and sensory information, but then there was overwriting in there too, kind of beating you over the head, levels of repetition with stuff like, quote, Ava twirled the tips of her hair, curling it into a knot. The bad habit was a physical manifestation of the cogs churning in her head, of the anxious thoughts that became too complex to bottle inside. She had childlike mannerisms, stunted from an upbringing full of very adult work, end quote. In this case, it reads less organic and more like the author's descriptions deliberately meant to tell you something is wrong, that this is child abuse, and that I don't want you to miss it. The overly descriptive, on-the-nose bits here weren't needed, and this happens often enough in the book that it actually pulled me out as a reader. Another example is this, quote, It was the epitome of her greed, a golden hue with soft rosy highlights, more striking than the sunset. It was 24-karat gold equivalent of hair, end quote. There was also redundancy in the prose that could have been helped with a line or copy editor. Things like, quote, He grabbed her wrists so tightly that he felt the tiny bones of her wrists, end quote. The over-the-top descriptions are great in doses for seasonings, but continually over-describing the scene and how sickly and horrible the girls look actually just deadens the reader to the terror, and it made me feel like I was reading the same scenes over and over and over again. The framing sensory information also could have been removed to make for easier reading. Things like he could hear, or he could see, or he felt. And the narrative voice is the camera lens. Whatever you point it at, the reader understands that the main character or the POV character is going to experience what you're telling us we are currently experiencing through the narration. This can also be said with the words beginning or began that were also in there, and you don't need to have those words in prose most of the time, and they actually slow down your sharp prose. The character getting cut off of their action will be cut off their action by the next character doing something. So we don't need, he began to move, she grabbed his arm. You should say, he moved, she grabbed his arm. That is just a sharper reading. Sometimes character actions in scenes seemed random and nonsensical, like the scenes talking to Berdana seemed kind of weird, and then there was the detective just shoving her hand into a jar of honey for no reason and then like licking straight off of her hand. It didn't make sense for the character or in the moment for what they were doing, and it came off like the writing advice, don't just let your characters stand there being talking heads. You just kind of gave them an action to do so they weren't just standing there, but then it's like, in the direct messaging department. I mentioned it in the summary, but there are areas when this got super on the nose with the messaging, purpose, and inspiration for the book, and it pulled me out of the novel as a reader. Sometimes it was in the form of after-school special, get in the van, don't you want some candy, sweetheart? That kind of level obvious. Other times it was stuff like, quote, we take pictures pretending to eat organic food at Whole Foods to impress the Instagram followers of LeClaire Model Management, Jordan said. Little girls need to believe we eat hemp brownies so exercise companies can make money, when the truth is half of us are eating cotton balls and the other half can be skinny while scarfing down sundaes. Another example is, soon the entire dining table was covered with images of social media and glossy idealizations of themselves. The girls barely spoke to each other. It was as if they felt so robotic, so alone, that they forgot how to love, end quote. I really liked the actual facility bits of chapter 16, where it should have been setting up the horror of the situation for the model industry by simply showing us the standards in the novel. However, what comes mixed into the chapter is a step away from storytelling and a step into the author, plus Ava straight up telling the reader about a cause she really cares about in the modeling industry. At this point, the messaging became the main course and a distraction from the story. Logical questions. All right, so I had a lot of logical questions, but these are the main ones that I stuck to for the review. If Cecil's mother looks at him like, I wish you weren't my son, then why did she invite him back to the house at all? What loyalties does she have to him if she's willing to do terrible things? If she knows that he could get her into legal trouble because she's kind of breaking the law and he thinks that he is holier than her, then what is her purpose for inviting him back to the house? There had to be some kind of tenderness she felt toward him to invite him into her den of doom, but this is never explained, and she goes from evil to, I don't know, I'm just kind of ignorant of it all. in the most unnatural, unbelievable way possible. I know that she's a liar, and there's no way to grasp any reason behind any of the actions she takes towards her son when we should be able to at least work something out. Like, especially knowing who her son is and how he is, why would she take him into the 4th floor specifically where more questionable merchandise is kept, knowing that Cecil could pop things off on her at any given moment? How did Cecil not see nude teenagers posing for sex and think, okay, pedophilia is going on here, and probably worse, I should probably talk to somebody? He doesn't even do anything when he sees that going on. Why was Margot's office key also randomly hidden in the back of the 4th floor? It didn't feel like there was any logical reason for it to be that way for Margot's way of living, but the novel just wanted to show off the walls of Tot Tots. Which, if that was the reason, there could have been a better way. Like I mentioned, the officers could have gotten to that floor, and that could have exposed that. Also, though, I don't think that introducing it so early on helped the novel, because the horrors couldn't be built up if you've already introduced the worst of the worst at the very beginning. There was no surprise left when nude teens are introduced at 30% of the way through the book. In regards to the basement layout, something didn't make sense in the immediate introduction of the casting room. It's out in the open with models who are just walking around from the elevator to the gym. The door is hanging wide open, the sign marked. At this moment, it reads like it is written for the sake of ease for the characters to find it so that Ava can explain directly what is going on. Again, that's making the story secondary to the purpose of the story, which is the preaching of the purpose. Additionally, if the door had been locked and they had to find a way in, there could have been a building tension to see what is behind that locked door. That's assuming that there's any difficulty in unlocking any of the doors. Since none of the other doors in the story had any difficulty being unlocked, locking the door might not have mattered anyway. Moving on from the basement, I don't know why there would ever just be pornographic images of model children on the counter of a business unless you were specifically meeting someone to talk about those images. It was just too convenient unless the doctor was going to actually see somebody and Cecil showed up and she forgot about the meeting and all of that was bamboozled. But she was also expecting the cops. So why were these questionable materials just laying out in the open? Doesn't make sense. There was a moment when a random door/mirror came unlocked and it was like, why is this happening? I thought a good option for this might have been for Ava to pull Cecil over to the mirror to see if he could unlock it, what being Margot's spawn. And then it works and she's like, hot damn. I think that this was the map room with all the passports, and that might have been a much more interesting way, especially if Ava was spying on Margot, that she had been trying to collect information on how to get into that room, and with Cecil showing up, she got an idea for how to get into that room. That would have been interesting. Why did the doctor get mad at Cecil and call him a bastard child after he was outraged about the human trafficking if she was also against the human trafficking and wanted to take Margot down? Either the doctor was working to undermine Margot because she hated Margot, or she wanted to make sure that Cecil was on the correct team before giving him answers. But every other second, these characters were flip-flopping for convenience, which then turned into side characters information dumping to inform Cecil on what to do next so he didn't have to actually work to get answers. What was the point of the fake persona if immediately it was busted and then they never tried to do anything and there were never any consequences to everybody knowing that Cecil Leclerc was running around? The conclusion doesn't really make sense, with Annabelle saying how she took over to get revenge on Margot and Perdana. A couple of things about this are hard to take. Number one is she's selling herself on the black market as herself, so there would be plenty of gossip going around that Annabelle is still alive. The other thing is that Annabelle went to Margot's family doctor facility, so the doctor there would rat out Annabelle, and there would be no reason to think that she wouldn't. On Exaggeration and Satire, I love me some over-the-top characters, responses, situations, stylization. I love it. Check out Dead End Drive. Check out Boom 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 coming next year. They are both satires. Over the top. But chapter 16 of this book broke its own logic. You've got the idea that these girls are being so abused as models. All right, I'm on board with that. Over-sexualization as part of the industry, I'm on board with that. Being forced to do certain things and look a certain way, I got you. But then we get to the overboard level of slave labor, which starts with working, jogging makes you free, and ends in a laundry room with the narration mentioning that the workers have to wear specific gloves in order to not mess up their perfect model hands. I have trouble with this. In this situation, I do not see how or why Margot or any of these people would risk the valuable models for physical slave labor. I get that models in the basement were less valuable to some extent, but they are still working out. The narration mentions that their hands must be protected for the sake of future work. So then why are these models being put to physical tasks that could end up making them less valuable? I have a very hard time reconciling these girls are to be treated this way physically because they're valuable like antique dolls and must be kept in peak condition with we're making them do manual labor at the risk of marring them and bringing down their value so we can't really sell them like we normally would. It reads like it's leaning a little too hard into the slave labor mistreatment and loses the strength of the original messaging. The characters I liked in the beginning felt like they lost their personalities as the stories went on, and that tends to happen when there is no follow-through with reason, logic, or motive. Everything becomes opportunism for the sake of the plot. There are no unplanned consequences or unintended desires, unwanted desires. Often there are no consequences at all, and you see this in this book. Again, why would the guy who got spat on by Ava give her all of the power in a private sexual situation? He wouldn't. Nitpicking. This one's important. I know that Cecil has only been in training, but he lived in the Abbey for a number of years to the point that this is a characterization on nitpicking with faith. When he is talking about marriage, he says, quote, "Shouldn't sex be more than just fun? You should love a person. Sex leads to babies. It's about love and family and marriage and," end quote. In the Christian faith, sex and marriage are seen as very holy because it's a combination of two souls into one, a covenant with God, of God, to God. Him being so weak on this point, I could see if he were newer to the faith and still learning, even if he was just regurgitating what he'd heard said, the ideas of marriage and sex would be different than the ones that he shared. Also, monks, nuns, devotees of God, they aren't in love with God. Loving God is so different than being in love with God. And that was just such a weird exchange in this book. There's a moment where he literally says to somebody else that he is in love with God, and that is why he can't be with other people. I mean, if he is in love with God and that's his thing, but that's not what monks do. Okay? It just made this monkhood and this use of faith in him feel very fake, and by somebody that doesn't really understand how faith works. Lack of tension is the last subject I'm going to talk about, and pretty much everyone in this book is constantly honest, except for Margot, telling the main character things and the main character telling everybody else things so they don't put themselves in real danger or have to find things out the hard way. You get the trope of everyone liking Ava, so everything just falls into her lap. She's also protected by the author. You can see this in the way that danger is deflected all the time. Additionally, no unplanned bad things happen to Ava. She just doesn't actually get raped when she's sold off. It's a bunch of safe dangers. It doesn't help that everything is delivered just so you don't have to infer anything going on in the story. Ava wants you to know just how bad she thinks everything is, making the story, again, secondary to the message, and ultimately that killed the story for me and made Ava come off as a bit of a self-insert. Ultimately, I think that the author went into this a little too ambitious with too much that she wanted to cover in the first book in what is a series. Balls to the wall from the start. I can't see what new, darker, and deeper turns this could take for Cecil if we've already discovered pedophilic human trafficking worldwide. That's one thing to consider when you're doing a series, is self-containing a specific objective storyline for that one to have your arc, and then there's the mini arcs in each of the books, and then there's the series arc that is carried by all the other things. Give us that self-contained arc and let the next book take us deeper and up the stakes. Trying to put every level of depth into one book of many at least makes me go, where the frick are we going to go from here? And it still be surprising. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Size Zero by Abigail Mangin. I encourage you to pick it up if you are interested in it, experience it for yourself, and then come back and let us talk. There is plenty to talk about in this book, that is for sure. With all of that said, thank you so much for sticking with me through this super long book cover review. And smash that like if you haven't done it yet. Until next time, have a great Monday and don't die.
The only people who should come are those who want to meet their monsters.
If this is what Agatha wants, I don't know how we can even dispute it.
I change lives, baby.
And I end them. Sweetheart, no bargains hold. Only fools know restraint.
Only losers lose!
I've been under the knife so many times, I'm practically immune to it.
If your scissors are dull, may I recommend sharpening them with leather?
I think I hit you.
Mimal says I must have a guardian angel.
To enter the ring but abstain from playing is suicidal. Your virtue makes you nothing but a liability.
You're gonna die. You're gonna die. You're gonna die.